At first glance, it was just another chaotic evening at New York's Port Authority bus terminal. The air buzzed with rolling suitcases, tired voices, and the scent of coffee wafting from late-night kiosks. Travelers rushed between gates, chasing schedules, tickets, and the illusion of order in a city that never stops moving. But in the middle of that restless crowd, one figure stood perfectly still. A sleek black Belgian Malinois, muscles tense beneath a polished K9 vest, froze mid-step. His name was Shadow, a dog trained to read what human eyes often miss. Beside him, Officer Daniel Cruz adjusted his uniform and scanned the crowd. To him, it looked like a normal shift. To Shadow, it didn't. Something invisible had shifted in the air. Across the terminal, two little girls walked hand in hand beside a well-dressed woman. Their small frames were swallowed by bright coats, their eyes wide with exhaustion. To everyone else, they looked like ordinary travelers, two sisters, maybe on their way home. But Shadow saw the stiffness in their gait, the nervous clutch of their fingers, the subtle tremor of fear. The low hum of the terminal blended into a restless rhythm, voices overlapping, phones ringing, announcements echoing from unseen speakers. Officer Cruz moved with steady precision through the concourse, his boots clicking against the marble floor. He had walked this beat for 5 years now, but something about tonight felt tense. He glanced down at Shadow. The dog's posture had changed, ears forward, eyes sharp, nostrils flaring as if testing the air for danger. Cruz recognized that look. It wasn't confusion. It was instinct. Shadow's eyes stayed fixed on the girls. The older one, about 8 years old, had hair neatly braided into twin plaits. The younger's hand was locked tightly in hers, their matching backpacks hanging loosely from slouched shoulders. Cruz's radio crackled softly in the background as he swept his gaze across the terminal. "Easy, boy," he murmured, giving the leash a gentle tug. "Just another night." But Shadow didn't move. His paw pressed firmly into the tile, tail rigid, gaze unwavering. Then, something small, a barely noticeable gesture, snapped Cruz's attention to the older twin. She lifted her hand slightly and tapped her thigh. Twice. 3 times. Then 2 more. 5 rhythmic taps. It was quick, deliberate, and repeated. Cruz almost missed it, but Shadow didn't. The dog froze completely, his body language changing in an instant, alert, tense, focused. He let out a low rumble, deep in his throat, the kind that came before action. Cruz frowned. "What is it, buddy?" he whispered, crouching slightly to follow his partner's gaze. His eyes landed back on the girls. They weren't smiling. Their steps were too measured, too careful for children that young. The woman with them, a pale-faced stranger in an expensive coat, pulled them along faster, glancing back just once. The handler's instincts flared. He'd seen this kind of fear before, the kind that hides in silence. "Hold up," Cruz muttered, voice low. He followed a few paces behind the trio, letting Shadow guide the distance. The dog moved like liquid tension, every step deliberate, every sense alive. The older girl, Safari, glanced up for a brief second. Her eyes met Shadow's, just for a heartbeat. Then she quickly looked away, her lips trembling as she turned back toward the woman. The dog's breathing deepened, ears flicking back. He had seen enough. Cruz felt it too. A faint pulse of danger, something unseen yet undeniable. He tightened his grip on the leash, his own pulse quickening to match the rhythm of his partner's focus. Then it happened again. 5 quick taps. This time on the girl's thigh. The pause. Then 5 more. The pattern was no accident. It was communication, silent, desperate. Cruz's mind raced back through his K9 training protocols. Dogs were taught to recognize rhythm-based cues, not for words, but for intention. Shadow's muscles rippled as he let out a controlled growl, not loud, but low enough for his handler to feel the vibration through the leash. Cruz's hand hovered near his belt as he muttered, "Talk to me, Shadow. What do you see?" The Malinois' head tilted slightly, nostrils twitching as he took in the faint scent of fear, salt, sweat, adrenaline. Then he leaned forward, pulling hard against the leash toward the girls and their escort. The woman turned her head slightly at the sound of the growl. Her face stayed calm, but her knuckles whitened around the girl's hands. "Come on," she said sharply, her voice carrying just enough force to make the children flinch. Cruz's instinct screamed. "Something's off," he whispered, eyes narrowing. He and Shadow began to close the distance, weaving through the crowd as announcements echoed overhead. The terminal buzzed louder now, people rushing past, unaware of the storm brewing in one quiet corner of Gate 34. As they approached, Shadow stopped again. His ears flicked, body low, tail stiff. Then came that low, deliberate growl, one that sent shivers down Cruz's spine. Safari's tiny hand trembled. Her sister, Engi, looked up at her with wide, frightened eyes. Cruz could see the fear now, unmistakable and raw. The handler took a slow breath. "All right, boy," he said softly, his voice steady but his heart pounding. "Let's find out what's going on here." He straightened, adjusting his grip on the leash. Shadow moved with silent precision, his gaze never leaving the trio. Around them, the terminal pulsed with noise, yet inside that small pocket of tension, the world seemed to hold its breath. No one else noticed the silent signal. No one but the dog who could hear danger even when it whispered. Welcome to Tales of an Observer, where truth, dignity, and courage meet in the stories we can't afford to forget. Now, before we get deep into the story, I would love to request a little favor from you. Please hit that subscribe button, like this video, and leave a comment telling me the city where you're watching from around the world. And also, please share this story with your loved ones. Now, let's get back into the story and see what unfolds. The crowd flowed on, oblivious to the quiet confrontation forming between instinct and evil. Shadow's stance had shifted from alert to certain. Whatever he sensed was no false alarm. Officer Daniel Cruz followed the woman and the twins deeper into the terminal, each step slower, more deliberate. His training told him to wait for backup, but his gut told him time was running out. As the hum of the city echoed through the glass walls above, the K9's tail stiffened once more. Somewhere in the blur of bodies and bright lights, two little girls were trapped in fear, and one dog was the only one listening. The trio moved through the terminal's central walkway, the woman in front keeping a firm grip on both girls. She weaved through travelers like a ghost avoiding notice, eyes down, pace quick, posture too composed. To anyone else, she looked like an anxious parent in a hurry. But to Cruz, it was a performance, calculated, rehearsed, wrong. Shadow padded silently beside him, each paw step measured, his body coiled with contained focus. His head tilted slightly with each flicker of movement from ahead, reading more than what was seen. Cruz's gaze followed the woman as she passed beneath the CCTV camera mounted over Gate 38. Just before she entered its range, she subtly turned her body, shielding the twins behind her. That wasn't coincidence. It was awareness. Avoidance. Cruz muttered under his breath. "You don't like cameras, do you?" The woman's pace increased, her heels clacking against the tiles as she tugged the girls toward the waiting area. One of them, Safari, stumbled slightly, nearly losing her balance. The woman didn't even slow down. She simply yanked the child upright with a flick of the wrist. Shadow's growl rumbled low in his chest. It wasn't loud enough for the crowd to hear, but Cruz felt it vibrate through the leash. "Easy, Shadow," he whispered, though he didn't really mean it. His partner's instincts were rarely wrong. He lifted the radio clip to his shoulder. "Unit 9, this is Cruz. Possible welfare check. I'm following a woman with 2 minors near gate 36. No cause for escalation yet, but something's off. Stand by for ID confirmation. Static answered, then a calm voice. Copy that 9. Keep visual. Back up on standby. Cruz lowered his hand and watched the trio stop near a vending machine. The woman crouched beside the twins, saying something low and sharp. He couldn't hear the words, but the tone was unmistakable, threat, not comfort. Both girls nodded quickly. Safari's small hands fidgeted near her sides, fingers trembling. Her sister, Engi, bit her lip, glancing nervously at a group of officers across the hall. Cruz adjusted his stance, pretending to check his watch. Shadow stood still but alert, his breathing controlled. Just another night, Cruz murmured again, though it felt like a lie. 5 years earlier. The rain had been coming down hard that night, the kind that muffles every sound. A younger Cruz had stood in a field behind the K-9 training facility, watching a black pup run figure-8s around cones. The trainer, an older sergeant named Wyatt, had been lecturing him about instinct. You can teach obedience, Wyatt said, but you can't teach a dog to feel fear. Cruz frowned. Feel it? Not their own, Wyatt clarified, crouching beside the pup, Shadow, only 6 months old then. Other people's. See, dogs pick up microcues, tremors in the muscles, the way a scent changes when adrenaline hits. Humans lie with their mouths. Dogs can't be fooled. He'd watched as Wyatt gave a signal, a quiet 5-tap rhythm on his leg. The pup stopped mid-run, ears shooting up. That pattern, Wyatt said, smiling faintly. That's how we train them to notice what others can't. Fear doesn't shout, Cruz. It taps. The memory flashed through Cruz's mind now like lightning. He blinked, returning to the present, to the terminal, to the dog standing beside him, grown, steady, and utterly still. Shadow was tapping his paw lightly on the tile. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A habit he'd picked up from those drills. Cruz's jaw tightened. You're sure, aren't you? He whispered. Shadow didn't move, but his eyes said everything. A few yards ahead, the woman, Janet Owens, as Cruz would soon learn, was pacing. She checked her watch again, her gaze flicking nervously toward the boarding schedule above the gate. Every few seconds, she glanced over her shoulder, scanning faces. Safari clung to Engi's hands so tightly their knuckles were white. Don't cry, she whispered in her soft Jamaican accent. Engi swallowed hard, her eyes darting toward the police dog standing across the hall. She said not to talk, she whispered back. Safari hesitated. Daddy said, 5 taps. Engi's lip quivered. She'll hurt us if we do. Maybe not if the dog hears, Safari said, her voice almost too quiet to be real. Her gaze drifted to Shadow again, the only creature who seemed to see her. She felt his stare like a lifeline. Slowly, trembling, she lifted her hand against her thigh. Tap, 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 tap. Shadow's ears flicked instantly. Cruz caught the shift, his heart hammering. It was the same signal. The same plea. He took a step forward, approaching with calm authority. Ma'am, he called, his tone even. Evening. NYPD K-9 unit. Just doing a routine security check. Do you have a moment? The woman turned smoothly, her face arranged into polite surprise. Oh, of course, officer. Is something wrong? Cruz smiled slightly, though his eyes stayed sharp. Just routine, ma'am. You traveling with the children? Yes, she said quickly, squeezing the girl's shoulders. My nieces. Their mother passed recently. I'm taking them to stay with family in Florida. Shadow sniffed the air, taking one step closer. Cruz nodded, keeping his tone casual. Sorry to hear that. You mind if I see some ID? Just to verify names with the manifest. Of course. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. She dug into her handbag with jerky movements, pulling out 2 passports and a ticket receipt. "There?" she said, voice a shade too cheerful. "Perfectly in order." Cruz accepted the documents and stepped back, scanning them quickly. The names matched the itinerary, but the girl's last name didn't match hers. "Your surname's different," he observed. "Different fathers," she said smoothly, too quickly. Shadow leaned closer to the bag she'd set on the ground, nostrils flaring. He let out a quiet growl. "Sorry," Cruz said mildly. "He's just doing his job." The woman laughed nervously. "Oh, it's fine. I suppose he smells all sorts of strange things here." Shadow took another step forward, lowering his head to the bag. The growl deepened, not aggressive, but unmistakable. Cruz felt the vibration through the leash again. He knelt beside his partner, pretending to check the harness. In truth, he was looking at the twins. Engi's cheeks were damp with tears she was trying to hide. Safari was biting her lower lip until it nearly bled. Cruz's chest tightened. "That's fear. Real fear." He rose slowly, meeting the woman's gaze. "You said Florida, right? What city?" "Miami," she said instantly. Cruz nodded. "Which part?" "The Paws. South Beach." "You're taking 2 8-year-olds to South Beach?" he asked lightly, one brow raised. Her smile faltered. "Their grandmother lives there." Cruz held her gaze for a long moment, silence stretching thin between them. Then he handed back the documents. "All right, thank you. Appreciate your patience." He stepped aside, letting her believe she was free to move. "You have a safe trip, ma'am." "Thank you, officer," she said, relief flickering across her face as she guided the girls away. But Cruz wasn't done. He turned slightly, pressing a finger to the radio at his shoulder. "Dispatch, Unit 9. I've got a possible false identification. Female suspect, Caucasian, mid-30s, traveling with 2 minors. Heading toward Gate 39. Request immediate verification on passports registered to Owens, Janet. Possible abduction. Over. Copy 9. Verification in progress." The radio crackled. Cruz exhaled, eyes narrowing. "We're not losing them, partner." Shadow barked once, quiet, controlled, but resolute. The kind of bark that meant, "I know." As the trio approached the far gate, Cruz followed at a careful distance, his mind balancing between training and instinct. He knew protocol said wait for backup, but his instincts screamed that something terrible was unfolding in real time. He looked down at Shadow, who moved with silent determination. "Stay close," he whispered. They passed under another row of lights. For a moment, the crowd thinned, leaving only the echo of footsteps and the hum of departure boards overhead. Cruz saw the woman glance behind again, her mask of composure slipping just slightly as she caught his eye. Her hand tightened on the girl's arms. Shadow's tail rose. His breathing deepened. He was ready to act. Cruz placed a steady hand on the leash, pulse pounding. Not yet, he told himself. But soon. He could feel the storm gathering in the air, the tension before something breaks. And when it did, he knew Shadow would be the first to move. For now, all he could do was follow. And listen to the only creature in the room who could truly hear fear. Cruz raised the radio one last time, keeping his voice low. "Unit 9 to dispatch. Suspect in motion toward Gate 39. Standing by for confirmation." Then, more softly to his partner, "Stay sharp, boy. Whatever this is, it's about to unfold." Shadow's gaze never wavered. His ears flicked once, then flattened against his head. They moved together, 2 shadows gliding through the noise, one guided by training, the other by instinct. The clock over the terminal ticked toward the hour, its metallic chime cutting through the air. No one around them knew that beneath the hum of travel and tired goodbyes, something dark was in motion. And if Cruz didn't act soon, those two little girls might vanish into it forever. The rhythmic hum of the terminal pressed on, a low, constant ocean of sound. Luggage wheels clattered, announcements echoed through speakers, and travelers rushed past without glancing twice at the quiet tension forming near Gate 39. Officer Daniel Cruz stood a few feet away from the woman he'd been tracking. His grip on Shadow's leash was firm, his eyes locked on her every movement. The dog's posture was tight, ears pricked, muscles coiled. Shadow wasn't guessing anymore. He knew. The woman, Janet Owens, according to the ID, was talking too fast now. "I've already told you, officer," she said, smiling a little too brightly. "We're going to Florida. These are my nieces. Their parents passed recently. It's been a hard few months." Her voice trembled slightly on the last words, but it wasn't sadness. It was calculation. Cruz had heard the same tone in interrogation rooms, people fabricating stories on the fly. He kept his tone calm. "I understand them. But for the record, we'll need to verify travel documentation. Can I see those IDs again?" She sighed dramatically, fumbling through her designer purse. Of course. The smile snapped back into place. "You're just doing your job." Shadow growled quietly. It wasn't loud, but the sound carried enough weight to make a few nearby travelers glance over. Janet froze, eyes darting to the dog. "Can you control him, please?" "He is controlled," Cruz said evenly. "He's just trained to notice things people don't." Her jaw tightened. "Well, maybe he's noticing how nervous you're making my nieces." Cruz didn't answer. He took the documents and stepped aside, radioing dispatch with one hand while keeping the trio in his peripheral vision. "Dispatch, Unit 9. I've got Owens, Janet. Request verification on Florida-bound passenger manifest and IDs. 2 minors listed under surname Grant. Need confirmation." "Copy, 9, came the static-laced reply. "Running check now." Cruz turned back just in time to see Safari flinch when Janet placed a hand on her shoulder. The pressure was subtle, but firm enough to make the girl's posture stiffen. Engi stood silently beside her, clutching her sister's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. Shadow's nose twitched. His eyes darted between the woman and the girls, reading the invisible thread of fear connecting them. Then he growled again, low and guttural. Janet laughed nervously, glancing at the onlookers now beginning to whisper. "He must smell the sandwiches in my bag," she said. "Dogs love ham, don't they?" Cruz's expression didn't change. "That's not what he's smelling." She looked away. "This is ridiculous," she muttered under her breath. "We're going to miss our bus." Cruz ignored her irritation and crouched beside Shadow, whispering, "Easy, boy. Stay with me." The dog didn't move, his gaze still locked on the twins. Safari's lips trembled. She glanced up at Cruz, her eyes wide, pleading, but silent. Her fingers twitched against her leg. He caught it again. The 5 taps. A chill ran down his spine. He'd seen enough. He stood, his tone measured but firmer now. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to remain here while we verify your documents." Janet blinked rapidly. "You can't just detain us for no reason." "I didn't say detained. I said stay put." Shadow growled again. This time, louder. Heads began to turn. The space around them widened as people instinctively moved away. A man at a nearby bench lifted his phone to record. "Everything okay, officer?" called one of the terminal security guards approaching from the side. Cruz kept his eyes on Janet. "Yeah," he said carefully. "Just a quick verification issue. Mind standing by with me?" The guard nodded, stepping closer. Janet's mask of calm began to slip. Her breathing quickened. "This is humiliating," she hissed. "I'm trying to take care of these children, and you're harassing me in public." "Then you shouldn't mind waiting a minute," Cruz replied. For a split second, her eyes flashed, not with fear, but with fury. Cruz recognized the shift. He'd seen it before, the look of someone deciding whether to run. He pressed his shoulder mic again. "Dispatch, I need that verification now." "Stand by," came the reply. "Still checking database." Cruz's gaze returned to Janet just as she stepped back, gripping the twins tighter. "We're done here," she said sharply. "Come on, girls." "Ma'am, please stop." But she didn't. Janet turned abruptly and began walking fast toward the boarding gates, dragging the girls with her. The crowd split around them, some whispering, others pulling out phones. "Shadow!" Cruz barked. The dog lunged forward before the word had even left his mouth. The leash snapped taut, nearly yanking Cruz off balance as Shadow surged through the stream of passengers. His bark tore through the terminal, sharp, commanding, impossible to ignore. "Ma'am, stop!" Cruz shouted, breaking into a run. Janet didn't look back. "Don't you dare!" she hissed under her breath, yanking Safari harder. Engi stumbled, nearly falling. Safari tried to help her, crying out softly, "Please stop." That was enough. Shadow bounded forward, weaving through the legs of startled travelers. People gasped, stepping back as the black dog cut through the crowd like a shadow with purpose. Cruz's voice echoed across the terminal. "Stop where you are." Janet spun, panic etched across her face. "Stay back," she shouted, trying to shield the twins behind her. Shadow froze a few feet away, growling, not attacking, just blocking her path. His stance was wide, solid, immovable. The air felt charged, like a wire about to snap. Cruz approached slowly, hand raised. "You're making this worse, ma'am. Just stop." Janet's breath came in short, ragged bursts. "They're my nieces," she screamed. "They're my family." "Then let's prove that," Cruz said quietly. For a moment, no one moved. Then Safari's small voice broke the silence, trembling but clear. "She's not our aunt." Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Janet's face drained of color. "What?" But before she could finish, her mask cracked entirely. She dropped the girl's hands and turned to run. Shadow lunged, not to bite but to block. His body collided with her legs, knocking her sideways into a bench. The sound of metal and panic filled the air. Cruz was on her in seconds, handcuffs clicking into place. "Janet Owens, you're being detained for questioning," he said firmly. "You have the right to remain silent." Her breath came in furious gasps. "You have no idea what you've done," she spat. "You think this ends with me?" Cruz ignored her words, his focus shifting to the twins. Both were trembling, Engi clinging to Safari's arm, eyes red and wet. He knelt beside them, his tone softening. "You're safe now, okay? You're safe." Shadow approached slowly, his body language calm now, his head low as he sniffed gently near the girls. Safari reached out a shaking hand and touched his fur. The dog licked her palm once, steady, grounding. Safari's tears came freely. "He heard me," she whispered. He heard the taps. Cruz looked down at Shadow, a lump forming in his throat. "Yeah," he said quietly. "He always does." Within minutes, backup arrived. The terminal pulsed with flashing lights and murmurs as officers secured the scene. Travelers whispered behind phones, capturing fragments of the moment that would soon go viral. Janet sat restrained on a nearby bench, her perfect posture gone, her eyes hollow. "Dispatch to Unit 9, the radio crackled. Verification complete. Passenger ID invalid. No travel record under that name. You were right, 9. Cruz exhaled slowly, pressing the mic. Copy that. Suspect in custody. 2 minors recovered, safe. He turned toward the girls, who now sat wrapped in emergency blankets provided by the responding team. Shadow rested beside them, tail curled gently around their feet. The sight, 2 children finding calm beside a black king, drew quiet awe from the bystanders. "Officer," one of the airport staff whispered. She was really kidnapping them?" Cruz nodded grimly. "Looks that way." The staffer shook his head. "Thank God for that dog." Cruz glanced at his partner, who was still watching Janet with an unblinking gaze. "Yeah," he murmured. "He doesn't miss much." As the noise of the crowd began to fade, Cruz stood at the edge of the cordoned-off area, radio still in hand. His pulse was slowing, but his thoughts weren't. If Janet Owens wasn't their real guardian, then who was she working for? And what did she mean? "You think this ends with me?" He felt the faint tug of Shadow's leash. The dog was staring at the suspect's dropped purse, nose twitching. Cruz crouched and saw it, a prepaid phone, half hidden beneath the fallen strap. He exchanged a look with Shadow. "Good catch, partner." Then, with deliberate care, he reached for the radio again. "Unit 9 to HQ, he said. "We've got evidence. Possible trafficking link. Send forensic team to collect." As he rose, the tension in his chest settled into something else, resolve. Shadow looked up at him, ears flicking in the dim terminal light. Cruz gave a faint smile. "You were right, buddy. This was never just a hunch." Shadow's tail gave a single quiet thump against the floor. And as the flashing lights reflected off polished marble and the curious crowd leaned in from a distance, Shadow lifted his head and released one final, sharp bark, clear, resonant, commanding. It cut through the noise of the terminal, freezing everyone in place for one breathless second. The bark wasn't anger. It was declaration. The hunt wasn't over. The flashing blue and red lights of the patrol units painted the marble floor of the terminal in flickering color. The chaos that had erupted minutes earlier was now giving way to a tense, uneasy stillness. Travelers whispered behind phone screens, police tape cordoned off the area, and 2 little girls sat huddled together on a metal bench, wrapped in silver rescue blankets that reflected the light like fragile armor. Officer Daniel Cruz stood a few feet away from Janet Owens. She sat cuffed but defiant, her expensive coat wrinkled, her carefully painted face cracking under the pressure. Her eyes darted between Cruz and the twins, flickering with something darker than fear, calculation. "You've made a huge mistake," Janet spat, her voice hoarse but controlled. "You have no idea what you've just done." Cruz kept his expression steady. "We're still figuring that out," he replied. "Why don't we start with who you really are?" "I told you who I am," she snapped. "Janet Owens. Their aunt. We're traveling to Florida. Their mother passed away last month. You're scaring them for no reason." Her tone rose, echoing off the glass walls. A few bystanders flinched at her sudden volume, but Cruz didn't move. Shadow stood between them, circling slowly, his gait deliberate, his gaze unwavering. The black dog's body was low, tense but controlled, every muscle reading the air like a living lie detector. Cruz's hand rested loosely on the leash. "If they're your nieces," he said evenly, "then they'll confirm it. Right, girls?" The twins didn't answer. Safari clutched Engi's hand tighter, her lips trembling as she looked from Cruz to Janet, then down at her lap. Janet forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "They're just scared," she said sweetly. "They've been through trauma. You wouldn't understand what losing a mother does to a child." Cruz's jaw flexed. "Try me." Janet's eyes narrowed. "This is harassment. I want to speak to my lawyer." "You'll get that chance," Cruz said, motioning to a second officer to stand by. But first, we're going to clear up a few details. Shadow let out a low growl as Janet shifted slightly in her seat. She froze, her composure faltering for just a second. "Call him off," she hissed. "He's threatening me." "He's reacting," Cruz corrected quietly. "There's a difference." The tension hung in the air, heavy and charged. Then Safari moved. The older twin slowly lifted her right hand and placed it on the bench beside her. 5 deliberate beats. Cruz's eyes widened. He knew that rhythm. He'd seen it at the terminal earlier, the same signal Shadow had recognized. The dog froze instantly, his head turning sharply toward the girl. His ears flicked forward, tail going rigid. "Shadow," Cruz whispered. Safari met the dog's gaze, her eyes glassy with tears. Then she tapped again. 5 more. It wasn't random. It wasn't nervousness. It was a message. Cruz felt his heartbeat quicken. His training screamed at him to stay calm, to observe, but instinct was louder. He crouched slightly, voice gentle. "Safari," he said carefully, "is that something your father taught you?" The little girl's eyes filled with tears, but she gave the smallest nod. That was all the confirmation Cruz needed. He stood slowly and turned to Janet. "Ma'am," he said, voice clipped and official, "I need you to open your bag." Janet's mask cracked completely. "Excuse me?" "Your bag," Cruz repeated. "Open it." Her eyes flicked to the floor, where her designer purse sat half open beside her boots. "There's nothing in there," she said quickly. "Just my things." "Then it won't be a problem." When she didn't move, Cruz took a step forward. "I'm not asking again." Janet's composure shattered. "You have no right to search my belongings without a warrant," she screamed, clutching the strap of the bag and pulling it closer. Cruz moved to take it. "We have probable cause." She yanked back hard, panic flashing in her eyes. "No!" The sudden motion made Shadow react instantly. He barked, sharp, powerful, commanding. The sound cut through the terminal, freezing everyone within earshot. Travelers who had been pretending not to watch now turned fully, eyes wide. "Shadow, stay," Cruz ordered, but the dog didn't need further instruction. His stance alone kept Janet pinned in place, her back pressed against the bench. Cruz reached down and seized the bag before she could resist again. "Step back," he said firmly. "Now." "Don't touch that," she shrieked, lunging forward. 2 officers grabbed her arms, holding her as Cruz unzipped the bag. What he saw inside made his stomach twist. Bundles of cash. 3 passports, all for different names. And beneath them, a small, prepaid phone wrapped in a white handkerchief. He lifted it carefully with a gloved hand. "Dispatch, this is Unit 9, he said into his radio, voice steady but cold. "Confirm we've got multiple IDs and currency consistent with trafficking. Sending photo evidence now." "Copy that, 9, the dispatcher replied. "Upload received. Hold subject." Cruz wasn't finished. He set the phone aside and dug deeper. Under a folded blouse lay a smaller pouch. He opened it and froze. Inside were photographs. Children. Different faces. Different ages. Some smiling, some not. All taken in the same plain, unrecognizable setting, each labeled with a single letter or number. He felt the air leave his lungs. He looked up at Janet, whose expression had changed from rage to something else, an eerie calm. "You don't know what you're getting involved in," she whispered. "You can't stop it." Cruz's grip tightened. "You want to bet?" He handed the photos to the other officer, his tone clipped. "Tag and bag all of this. We'll process it at the precinct." Janet's calm vanished. "You're destroying everything," she screamed, trying to rise. "You think you're saving them? You have no idea what comes next." "Sit down," Cruz barked. Shadow took a deliberate step forward, his growl deep and resonant. Janet froze again, trembling. The dog's presence alone seemed to strip away her arrogance. For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. Cruz turned back to the twins. They sat side by side, their small shoulders shaking. Safari's hands were clasped in her lap, knuckles white. Engi's eyes overflowed, her breaths shallow and uneven. Cruz softened his tone. "Hey," he said quietly, crouching down to their level. "It's okay. You're safe now." Safari swallowed hard. "She said she'd hurt us if we talked." Engi nodded weakly. "She said we had to go to a new home." Cruz's chest tightened. "Not anymore," he said. "No one's going to hurt you again." Shadow approached slowly, lowering himself until he sat directly in front of the girls. His head tilted, eyes gentle but alert. Safari reached out and laid a trembling hand on his fur. "He heard me," she whispered again, voice breaking. Cruz smiled faintly. "Yeah," he said. "He always does." 15 minutes later, Janet Owens was being escorted out of the terminal, her shrill protests echoing behind her. "I want my lawyer. This is a mistake. You'll regret this." The media would later replay that footage endlessly, her screams, the officers surrounding her, the black dog watching silently as she was taken away. Cruz stood off to the side, arms crossed, exhaustion washing through him. The adrenaline had faded, leaving only the weight of what they'd uncovered. "Sergeant wants a full report," one officer said, approaching. "They're saying this might connect to a trafficking network out of Jersey." Cruz nodded grimly. "Get the phone to digital forensics. We need to know who she was talking to." "On it." As the officer left, Cruz knelt beside Shadow, rubbing behind the dog's ears. "You did good, partner," he murmured. "Better than any of us." Shadow leaned into his touch, eyes still fixed on the departing suspect. Cruz exhaled and turned toward the bench where the twins sat. They looked small, fragile even, in the vast brightness of the terminal. A social worker had arrived, kneeling beside them with warm blankets and a gentle voice. But Safari's eyes never left Shadow. When he finally turned his gaze back to her, she managed a faint, grateful smile. Cruz watched them for a long moment, the sounds of the terminal fading to a distant hum. The dog sat perfectly still beside him, tail curled, body calm but ready, as if waiting for whatever came next. Cruz's gaze drifted to the evidence bag now sealed and labeled on the table nearby. The photographs. The phone. The cash. This wasn't just a kidnapping. This was a system, a network. Janet Owens was just one thread in a web that ran far deeper than anyone in this terminal could see. Cruz's stomach turned as he imagined how many faces were still out there, waiting for someone to notice their silent signal. He glanced down at Shadow, who met his gaze with quiet certainty. "If she's involved in trafficking," Cruz murmured, half to himself, "there are more victims out there." The dog's tail gave a single, slow tap against the floor, acknowledgement, agreement. And as the noise of the city pulsed faintly beyond the glass walls, the unspoken truth hung heavy in the air. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Morning light spilled through the high windows of the NYPD Task Force office, painting the room in thin streaks of gold. The buzz of conversation was constant. Detectives, analysts, and tech specialists moving between desks stacked with files and monitors. In the middle of it all stood Officer Daniel Cruz, one hand on his hip, the other gripping a steaming cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Shadow sat quietly beside him, black fur gleaming under the fluorescence, his eyes tracking every movement in the room. The K9 was calm, but alert. He could feel the tension in his handler's stance, sense the unease that hung like static in the air. A forensics tech hurried over with a phone sealed in a clear evidence bag, the same prepaid device recovered from Janet Owens's purse. "Lieutenant says this just came back from digital," she said, passing the report to Cruz. "It's not good." Cruz scanned the page. A string of coded text messages filled the log, each one short, clinical, and chillingly detached. "Cargo ready. M approved. Transfer confirmed 2200 hours. Route active, NJ holding." The pit of Cruz's stomach tightened. "NJ holding," he murmured, glancing up. "New Jersey. That's where the next stop is." "Already traced," the text said. "GPS ping from the last outgoing signal. It came from a warehouse district outside Newark, abandoned freight property near the docks." Cruz set the cup down and straightened. "Get me the task force lead. We're moving on this today." Shadow lifted his head, ears pricking at the sound of Cruz's tone. He knew that voice. It meant movement, action, purpose. Across town, in a quiet child protection facility, Safari and Engi sat together on a sofa too big for their small frames. The room was warm and bright, decorated with pastel murals of clouds and trees, but the twins still held each other tightly, eyes darting every time the door opened. A gentle-faced social worker named Ms. Green knelt beside them, offering cups of hot chocolate. "You're safe here," she said softly. "No one can hurt you now." Safari nodded faintly, but her gaze was distant. "She said we were going somewhere new," she whispered. "A place with other kids." Engi shivered. "She said they'd make us good, so people would like us." Ms. Green's heart clenched, but she kept her tone steady. "You don't have to be afraid anymore. The police are finding the people who did this." Safari looked down, voice barely a breath. "There were more kids before us. At the house, we could hear them crying." Engi's hand tightened on hers. "And a man came one night. Janet said his name started with M." Ms. Green exchanged a glance with the plainclothes detective standing by the door, who immediately began taking notes. "Do you remember anything else?" the detective asked gently. Safari nodded slowly. "He had a ring, with a letter on it. Back at the NYPD headquarters, Cruz stood in the briefing room beside a large map projected on the wall. The location was circled in red: Newark Dock District, Warehouse 42B. "Surveillance confirms movement at the site," said Lieutenant Harper, the task force commander. "Night traffic, unmarked trucks, minimal lighting. We've got reason to believe this isn't just storage, it's distribution." Cruz folded his arms, his focus sharp. "Human cargo," he said. Harper nodded grimly. "Exactly. We go in low profile. Local units will block exits. K-9 teams take point." He turned to Cruz. "That includes you and Shadow. You found the lead, you'll run the front entry." Cruz gave a short nod. "Understood." As the officers dispersed, Cruz crouched beside Shadow. "You ready for this, boy?" Shadow's tail thumped once, slow and steady. His eyes gleamed like polished glass, reflecting the blue light of the monitor. Cruz smiled faintly. "That's what I thought." By late afternoon, the team was on the move. The hum of engines filled the van as they sped through the Holland Tunnel toward New Jersey. Rain streaked across the windshield, blurring the glow of city lights into smears of red and gold. Cruz sat with Shadow at his feet, running through mental checklists, protocols, breach plans, target layout. But his thoughts kept circling back to the twins. Safari's trembling voice. The way Engi had clung to her sister like she was the only safe thing in the world. He'd seen fear before, but this was something else. Fear born from captivity, from losing trust in every adult meant to protect them. He reached down, scratching behind Shadow's ear. "You know," he murmured, "they're the reason we're doing this. Those girls. And the others we haven't met yet." Shadow looked up, meeting his eyes. His quiet presence was answer enough. Evening fell hard over Newark's industrial district. The rain had stopped, but the streets glistened with puddles reflecting the orange glow of distant streetlights. Warehouse 42B loomed ahead, rusted corrugated metal, long-abandoned signage, a single truck parked along the side. A faint hum came from inside, almost like machinery, but deeper. The task force fanned out silently, positioning around the perimeter. Cruz crouched low behind a stack of pallets, Shadow at his side. Through the faint cracks in the warehouse siding, he could see shadows moving, slow, methodical. Harper's voice crackled in his earpiece. "All units in position. On my mark." Cruz whispered, "Shadow track." The Malinois lowered his head, sniffing the damp air. His nostrils flared, catching the scent, human fear, sweat, and something metallic, like blood and oil. He froze, then turned sharply toward a side door half hidden by stacked crates. "Shadow's got something," Cruz whispered into his mic. "Copy that, 9, Harper replied. "Hold until breach." Shadow's body tensed, tail stiff. Cruz could feel the energy vibrating through the leash like a live wire. Easy, he thought, his breathing steady. "We do this together." Meanwhile, at the protection center, Safari sat by the window, tracing raindrops as they slid down the glass. "Do you think the dog's okay?" she asked. Engi looked up from her coloring book. "Shadow." Safari nodded. "He's brave. I think he's looking for the others." Ms. Green smiled gently. "He's a police dog, sweetheart. That's his job." Safari looked down. "He listens when people can't talk." The room went quiet. Even Ms. Green couldn't find the words for that kind of truth. Back in Newark, the signal came through. "All units, go." The sound of boots hitting wet concrete filled the air. Doors splintered. Flashlights cut through darkness. The air exploded with shouts, "MID! Hands up!" and the echo of footsteps as suspects scrambled in confusion. Cruz moved fast, clearing the first hallway with precision. Shadow was ahead of him by half a step, nose low, eyes bright, guiding him toward the deeper part of the structure. "Left corridor clear," shouted an officer behind him. "Copy," Cruz called, advancing toward storage sector. Shadow paused near a heavy metal door, ears flat. A faint noise seeped from behind it, muffled sobs. Cruz's heart clenched. "Harper," he radioed. "We've got live voices. Children, I think. Hold position. Breach in 3, go." The door burst open with a screech of rusted hinges. The beam of Cruz's flashlight cut through the dark, and there they were. 5 children. Dirty, terrified, huddled in the corner of a shipping container. Their faces streaked with tears, their clothes too big, too worn. One little boy blinked up at the light and whispered, "Please don't hurt us." Cruz lowered his weapon instantly. "It's okay. You're safe now." Shadow stepped forward, tail lowering gently. The children froze, then one of the girls reached out. "Dog," she murmured, her voice trembling. Shadow sniffed her hand, then sat beside her, unmoving, a wall between them and everything they feared. Cruz swallowed hard, emotion tightening in his throat. "Get medical and child services in here, now," he shouted to the others. The radio crackled with responses, "Copy, EMTs en route." But Cruz barely heard it. He was kneeling now, helping one of the older boys stand. "You're safe," he repeated softly. "You're going home." By the time the scene was secured, 4 suspects were in custody. Harper approached Cruz, his face grim. "We found ledgers. Lists of names. This wasn't small time." Cruz wiped the rain from his forehead, glancing toward the rescued children being led out under blankets. "It never is." Harper placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did good work, Cruz. You and that dog of yours." Cruz looked down at Shadow, who sat silently at his feet, watching the children with calm eyes. "He did most of it," Cruz said softly. "He heard what we didn't." Shadow turned his head, meeting his handler's gaze. The moment stretched between them, quiet understanding forged in danger and trust. Cruz gave a faint smile. "You found them once," he said, voice low and steady. "Let's finish what we started, partner." Shadow's tail flicked once in response, the sound soft but sure, like a promise. The storm came down hard that night, drenching the industrial outskirts of Newark in sheets of cold rain. Streetlights flickered through the downpour, their yellow glow blurring against the wet asphalt. The air was thick with diesel fumes and tension. A convoy of unmarked police vehicles rolled through the darkness, wipers working furiously. Inside the lead SUV, Officer Daniel Cruz sat with Shadow at his feet, reviewing the warehouse blueprints glowing faintly on the tablet in his lap. The rhythmic hum of rain against metal mixed with the low crackle of radio chatter. "Unit 9, confirm position," came Lieutenant Harper's voice through the earpiece. Cruz lifted the mic, "Unit 9 in place. Approaching warehouse perimeter now." "Copy that. All units, remember, we've got live cargo inside. Keep it clean." Cruz nodded silently and glanced down at his partner. Shadow sat still, eyes focused on the window, ears twitching at every sound outside. The dog's steady presence grounded him in the chaos, one living pulse of certainty in a night built on risk. "Ready, partner?" Cruz whispered. Shadow's tail tapped once, slow and deliberate. "Good boy." They reached the warehouse compound at 23:47 hours. The area was eerily quiet, no guards, no visible lights except a faint glow seeping through the cracks of corrugated metal panels. The storm masked the sound of boots as the K9 team moved into formation, rain pelting their gear, the faint click of rifles echoing under the thunder. "Spread out," Cruz ordered softly, voice steady over the rain. "Check the east and south sides. Shadow and I will clear the main entry." He unclipped Shadow's leash. "Track." The dog lowered his head and began to move, nostrils flaring as he traced the invisible path of scent through puddles and wind. His pace quickened suddenly, something had caught his attention. Cruz followed, flashlight beam cutting through the mist. "What is it, boy?" Shadow stopped near a rusted side door, tail rigid. He sniffed again, then turned sharply, pulling toward a row of stacked shipping containers near the back of the lot. The smell hit Cruz a second later. Sour sweat, fear, something chemical and wrong. He keyed his mic. "Harper, this is 9. I've got something. North perimeter, container row. Shadows signaling." "Copy that, 9. Holding perimeter. Your green light to check it out." They moved closer. Shadow's breathing grew heavy, his focus laser-sharp. His nose pressed against one of the metal container seams. Then he froze, ears flicked forward. Cruz crouched, pressing an ear against the cold metal. For a moment, he heard nothing but rain. Barely audible. Sobs. He stood, voice tight. "We've got live bodies inside." Within seconds, other officers converged, flashlights bouncing through the rain. "Get a pry bar over here," someone shouted. Cruz tried the lock. It was reinforced, welded in places. "They didn't want anyone opening this," he muttered. 2 officers worked the crowbars into the seam. The metal screeched under pressure. "Come on," Cruz urged. "Come on." With a loud snap, the latch broke free. The door swung open, and the beam of Cruz's flashlight fell on 5 small faces. Children. Dirty, shivering, eyes wide with terror. They were huddled together under thin blankets, the floor beneath them littered with empty bottles and torn wrappers. The stench of confinement and fear rolled out like a wave. Cruz's chest tightened. "It's okay," he said quickly, lowering his weapon. You're safe now. We're police. The kids didn't move. One of the smallest, a girl no older than 6, blinked through the glare. She whispered hoarsely, she said someone else was coming for us tomorrow. Cruz crouched down, heart pounding. Who said that, sweetheart? The girl swallowed, eyes darting. The lady. The one with the red scarf. She said the man with the ring would take us next. Cruz glanced over his shoulder at Harper, who had just arrived. You get that? Harper nodded grimly. Sounds like They both looked back inside the container. Against one wall sat a small table covered with papers, clipboards, and a cheap laptop sealed in plastic. Cruz sifted through them quickly, careful not to disturb evidence. Every document told the same story: coded delivery notes, initials, locations, dates. M approval, transfer cleared, cargo processed. This is a logistics chain, Cruz muttered. A system. Harper's face darkened. And this place is just one stop. The children were escorted out carefully, each wrapped in dry blankets from the emergency van. The rain had softened to a mist, but the air was still heavy with dread. Cruz stayed with them, crouching beside the oldest boy, a wiry 12-year-old who kept looking over his shoulder. They're gone, Cruz said gently. You're safe. No one's going to take you again. The boy nodded faintly but didn't speak. His eyes flicked to Shadow, who stood a few feet away, watching quietly. Can I pet him? The boy asked hesitantly. Cruz smiled. Go ahead. The boy stretched out a trembling hand. Shadow lowered his head, letting the child's fingers sink into his wet fur. The other kids followed, slowly, drawn by something wordless and steady. For a few moments, the night wasn't about fear or darkness. It was about a quiet kind of peace, one shaped like trust. Cruz stood back, rain dripping from the brim of his cap, watching as Shadow allowed the children to gather around him. Their soft voices filled the air like a fragile hymn. Harper approached, his boots squelching in the mud. The laptop's been secured, he said. IT's pulling files now. We've got ledgers tied to bank accounts in 3 states, all linked to a single entity, initial M. Cruz's brow furrowed. So this M runs the operation? Looks that way, Harper replied. But whoever they are, they're careful. No names, no faces. Just the initial. Like a ghost. Cruz looked out toward the dark skyline beyond the fence. The storm clouds were breaking, but the city still loomed like a shadowed giant, alive, indifferent. This ring doesn't stop here, he said quietly. It's bigger. Smarter. Harper nodded. We'll find them. One step at a time. As the scene wrapped up, the children were loaded into ambulances, frightened but alive. Shadow trotted beside Cruz, rainwater dripping from his coat. The faint wail of sirens rolled across the docks, rising and fading like the heartbeat of the city. Cruz stopped for a moment, turning back toward the warehouse. The flicker of police lights painted everything in red and blue, the universal colors of rescue and aftermath. He ran a hand through his soaked hair and exhaled slowly. You did good tonight, partner. Shadow looked up at him, eyes glinting in the dark. His chest rose and fell, steady calm. You always know where to find them, Cruz continued softly, even when no one else can hear them. Shadow's tail gave a small, tired wag. For a brief second, the wind shifted, bringing with it the scent of salt water and rust, and something faintly human. The dog's head turned slightly, scanning the dark horizon. Cruz followed his gaze. The docks stretched endlessly ahead, rows of containers stacked like tombs. Somewhere out there, the rest of the network still moved, hidden beneath layers of silence and money. The rain began again, softer this time, almost cleansing. Harper's voice broke through the radio. All units, operation complete. Return to base for debrief. Cruz pressed the mic. Copy that. Unit 9 heading out. He gave one last look at the warehouse before turning back to the car. Shadow jumped into the seat beside him, curling up but keeping one ear pricked toward the window. As Cruz started the engine, he glanced up at the reflection of flashing lights against the rearview mirror. "We saved 5, he murmured, more to himself than anyone. But how many more are still out there? Shadow didn't move, but Cruz could feel the weight of understanding between them. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. As they drove away, the sirens faded behind them, replaced by the steady rhythm of rain against glass. The city slept, unaware of the nightmare that had just been uncovered, and of the silent bond between one man and one dog who refused to stop listening. Cruz looked out into the darkness ahead. The skyline shimmered faintly in the distance, half hidden by mist and stormlight. Somewhere out there, M was still watching. And Cruz swore under his breath, "We're coming for you." The storm hadn't fully passed. The air around the Newark docks still buzzed with the aftermath of thunder, and the smell of rain-soaked asphalt mixed with oil and rust. Police lights pulsed across the wet pavement, blue, red, blue again, flashing against the sides of the old warehouse. The rescue was wrapping up. EMTs were tending to the children, wrapping them in blankets and checking vitals. The task force officers were cataloging evidence, boxes, files, computers, and the endless trail of broken lives left behind. Cruz stood by the perimeter tape, talking into his radio while Shadow sat beside him, alert but quiet. The dog's black coat was damp, his nose still twitching as if searching for something more. "Yeah, Lieutenant," Cruz said. "We've secured the last of the evidence. Kids are safe. Units are sweeping the perimeter. Looks like this site's clear." But Shadow didn't seem convinced. His body was too still. His ears kept flicking toward the rear of the compound, where the chain-link fence met a row of parked cargo trucks. Cruz noticed. "What is it, boy?" The dog's head turned sharply, nostrils flaring. Then he stood. Every muscle in his body tensed like a drawn bow. "Shadow!" The next moment shattered the calm. The metallic shriek of twisting metal cut through the rain as a black SUV smashed through the back gate, scattering debris. The engine roared, tires spitting water as the vehicle fishtailed across the yard. "Vehicle breach. Backgate. Vehicle breach." An officer shouted into the radio. "Go! Go! Go!" Cruz barked, breaking into a sprint. Shadow didn't wait for the command. He was already running, a streak of motion slicing through the floodlit chaos. His bark echoed through the night, deep and urgent. The SUV barreled toward the exit road, taillights flaring through the mist. Cruz jumped into the nearest patrol car. Unit 9 in pursuit. Suspect fleeing northbound from the dockyard, black SUV, license unconfirmed. He hit the sirens, the wail slicing through the downpour. Shadow ran alongside for the first 50 yards, paws splashing through puddles before Cruz swung the passenger door open. "In." The dog leapt inside without breaking stride. Cruz hit the accelerator. The chase tore through the narrow industrial streets, water spraying from the tires. The SUV swerved dangerously between lanes, narrowly missing a lamppost before cutting hard onto a service road. "Harper, we're heading east toward the freeway ramp." Cruz shouted into the radio. "Copy 9. Back up in pursuit from the south entrance. Proceed with caution." "Caution's gone," Cruz muttered under his breath. "We're doing this our way." Shadow braced against the seat, his gaze locked through the windshield, muscles rippling with every turn. His low growl filled the cabin like a warning. The suspect's vehicle swerved again, trying to lose them. But the Malinois instincts were keener than any machine. Every time the SUV disappeared behind a turn, Shadow shifted, ears tilting in the direction of the fleeing engine, tracking sound and scent through the storm. Cruz trusted him completely. "You got him, huh?" Shadow's growl deepened. They rounded another corner. The SUV was up ahead, its headlights flaring through the mist. Suddenly, the driver veered toward a smaller police cruiser trying to block the road. "Watch it!" Cruz shouted. The SUV clipped the cruiser's bumper, sending it spinning into a guardrail. Sparks flew. The air filled with the scream of metal and brakes. Suspects ramming vehicles. Harper's voice came through the radio, sharp and tense. "Do not let him reach the bridge." "Copy that." Cruz slammed the gas pedal. The patrol car surged forward, closing the distance. "Hold on, Shadow." The Malinois planted his paws, body pressed low. The rain lashed harder, blurring everything but the red glow of the SUV's taillights. Then, the suspect made a mistake. He tried to take a turn too fast. The SUV fishtailed again, skidding across a puddle of oil. Cruz seized the chance, cutting the wheel hard and ramming the front bumper into the rear quarter of the fleeing car. The impact jolted through his chest like an electric shock. The SUV spun out, slamming sideways into a concrete divider. Its tires screeched, then went still. Cruz jumped out before the vehicle had fully stopped moving. "Out of the car!" "NYPD!" he shouted. But the driver wasn't giving up. The man, a tall figure in a black jacket, shoved his door open, coughing through the smoke. His face was half hidden, but Cruz caught a glimpse of something gleaming on his hand, a silver ring marked with the letter M. Cruz froze. "The ring. Hands where I can see them." The man didn't comply. He turned sharply, raising something from the passenger seat, a metallic glint that could have been a weapon. Shadow leapt before Cruz could react. In one powerful motion, the dog launched through the open window of the SUV, jaws locking onto the man's forearm. The weapon, a small pistol, clattered to the ground. The suspect shouted, stumbling back, trying to shake the dog loose. But Shadow held firm, growling deep from his chest, every muscle straining. Cruz rushed forward. "Shadow, hold!" He tackled the man from behind, forcing him to the wet pavement. "Hands behind your back." Officers from the trailing units arrived seconds later, surrounding them with guns drawn. "Suspect in custody!" Cruz yelled. "Stand down!" Shadow released his grip and stepped back, chest heaving, ears flat but alert. Cruz cuffed the man, flipping him onto his back. The suspect glared up through the rain, his expression twisted between pain and fury. "You think you stopped it?" he hissed. "You're too late." Cruz leaned closer. "Late for what?" The man smirked. "You'll find out when the next shipment doesn't arrive." Before Cruz could respond, officers pulled the man to his feet and dragged him toward a waiting unit. Harper arrived moments later, rain plastering his coat to his shoulders. "You good, Cruz?" "Yeah," Cruz said, catching his breath. He crouched beside the SUV, checking the interior. "Let's see what our friend was protecting." Inside the wrecked vehicle, he found 2 burner phones, a leather-bound ledger, and a USB drive taped under the dashboard. Each item was sealed quickly in evidence bags. "Harper," Cruz said quietly, "this guy wasn't running from us. He was running to destroy evidence." Harper nodded grimly. "And he almost made it." Cruz glanced at Shadow, who was now sitting beside the wreck, rain dripping off his muzzle. The dog's eyes were steady, calm again after the adrenaline storm. Cruz crouched beside him, hand resting gently on the wet fur behind his neck. "You don't miss a thing, do you, boy?" Shadow leaned slightly into the touch, tail giving one small, tired wag. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Around them, officers shouted into radios, engines idled, sirens wailed, and yet, it all felt distant. The chase was over. But the war wasn't. Harper approached with a grim look, holding the ledger. Names Cruz. Dozens of them. All children. Cross-referencing with missing persons databases already. Looks like this ring spans multiple states. Cruz exhaled slowly. We're not dealing with a local crew. This is national. Maybe bigger. Cruz stood, watching as the suspect was loaded into the transport van. And now we've got the man with the ring. Yeah, Harper said, glancing toward the dark skyline beyond the rain. But if he's just middle tier, someone higher is still calling the shots. Cruz nodded, expression grim. Then we keep digging. The rain had eased into a steady drizzle. The distant wail of sirens faded into the hum of the city beyond the docks. Shadow sat beside Cruz, head tilted toward the horizon, his breath visible in the cold night air. The faint reflection of red and blue lights shimmered in his eyes. Cruz knelt beside him once more, voice quiet. You were right from the start, partner. You always are. The dog blinked, calm and watchful. Together, they stood there at the edge of the rain-slick street, the remnants of the chase behind them and the city stretching endlessly ahead, a maze of lights hiding darkness still to be uncovered. The storm had ended, but the hunt had only just begun. The rain had stopped by morning, but the sky over New York was still heavy with gray. Inside the precinct's interrogation wing, fluorescent lights buzzed softly, a sterile hum against the tension in the room. Janet Owens sat at the metal table, her once perfect posture now slouched, wrists cuffed loosely in front of her. Her hands shook as she stared at the floor, eyes swollen from hours of questioning. The composure she'd worn like armor at the terminal was gone. What was left was a woman cracked open by fear. Across from her sat Officer Daniel Cruz, silent but steady. He'd been in this room too many times before, but this one felt different. The stakes were higher. The faces of the children, especially the twins, Safari and Engi, still haunted the corners of his mind. A federal investigator leaned against the wall, flipping through a file. You've had all night, Janet, he said. The evidence is overwhelming. You can either cooperate, or you can disappear into a cell for the rest of your life. Your choice. Janet's lips parted, voice trembling. You don't understand, she whispered. You don't know who they are. Then tell us, Cruz said calmly. She hesitated. It started 6 months ago. A man contacted me online, through a placement agency, he called it. Said he worked for families overseas who couldn't adopt through normal channels. He offered money. Good money. $10,000 per delivery. Cruz's stomach tightened. Children, he said quietly. She nodded, avoiding his eyes. He called himself M. Never gave a full name. Always sent instructions through a prepaid phone. I never met him in person, just a voice. Cold. Careful. The investigator took a step closer. You expect us to believe you were just a middleman? Janet's voice cracked. I was scared, okay? When I tried to back out, he sent pictures of my sister's house. He knew where she lived. He said if I stopped, someone else would come for my family. Cruz studied her face. Fear had etched itself into her expression, the kind that wasn't easily faked. Still, sympathy was a luxury he couldn't afford. Who else worked with you? He asked. Janet's eyes darted toward the folder on the table. The man you caught last night, the one with the SUV, he was M's courier. I just delivered the children. He handled transport. Cruz exchanged a look with the investigator. The ring was real, and organized far beyond what they'd first believed. Do you know where M is? Janet swallowed hard. No. But there's something you should check. She looked up finally, her eyes glassy but sharp. He uses warehouses as drop points. He always said, the network runs on silence. No faces. Only routes. You stop one, another takes its place. Cruz leaned forward slightly. Then tell us the next route. Janet closed her eyes. Newark was supposed to be the last pickup before the transfer. He said a new shipment was coming from the south next month. That was enough. The federal agent stood and snapped the folder shut. We'll corroborate that with the evidence from the SUV. If she's telling the truth, we've got a lead on something bigger. Cruz rose quietly. She's telling the truth, he said, glancing toward the glass wall where Shadow waited just outside, sitting obediently beside an officer. She's too scared not to. By midday, the story had broken nationwide. Police dog uncovers trafficking ring. 5 children rescued from warehouse. The dog who heard the silent signal. Shadow's picture, taken outside the Newark warehouse, eyes alert and fur glistening with rain, was everywhere. Social media flooded with praise, hashtags, and news clips. People called him a miracle, a hero, the dog who listened when no one else did. But Cruz wasn't basking in the spotlight. He sat in his office, scrolling through the headlines with a hollow expression. The weight of everything they'd uncovered pressed against his chest. For every child saved, how many more were still out there? He glanced down at Shadow lying near his desk, head resting on his paws. The dog's tail flicked lazily, unaware of his newfound fame. "You don't even know you're famous," Cruz murmured, smiling faintly. "You just did what you always do." Shadow's ears perked, as if recognizing the tone rather than the words. He gave a small huff and stretched his paws out. Cruz's smile faded. "You saved them, partner. But we almost didn't get there in time." The thought stuck like a thorn. He leaned back in his chair, the image of Safari tapping 5 times burned into his memory. That tiny gesture, a child's desperate signal, had been the thread that unraveled an entire network. If Shadow hadn't noticed, he shook the thought away. "You did," he said softly. "That's what matters." Across town at the safe house, Safari and Engi sat at a small table with crayons and paper. A warm lamp glowed above them, chasing away the gray outside. "Look," Safari said, holding up her drawing. It showed a big black dog standing tall beside 2 little girls. The caption, written in careful block letters, read, "Our hero." Engi added a heart beside the dog's paw print. "Do you think he'll see it?" she asked. The social worker smiled. "We'll make sure he does." Safari smiled for the first time in days. He listened when no one else did. Back at the precinct, Cruz's phone buzzed. A message from the FBI task force lead lit the screen. Confirmed. Ring dismantled. Suspects in custody in 3 states. Still unidentified. Investigation expanding. Cruz exhaled slowly, tension bleeding out of his shoulders. "It's over," he murmured. Then quieter, "For now." Harper appeared in the doorway, holding a file. "They're calling this one a win, Cruz. The Bureau wants a full commendation for you and Shadow." Cruz gave a half smile. "Give it to the dog. He earned it." Harper chuckled. "Already in the works. K-9 Division says they've never seen instincts like his." He hesitated, then added, "You okay?" Cruz nodded, though his eyes said otherwise. "Just thinking about those kids. How close we came to losing them." Harper crossed his arms. "You can't save everyone." "I know," Cruz said softly. "But if we hadn't listened, if Shadow hadn't—" He stopped, looking down at his partner. Shadow had lifted his head, as if he sensed the heaviness in the air. Cruz smiled faintly. "Guess he'd tell me to stop overthinking it." Harper grinned. "Dogs are smarter than they look." "Smarter than most of us," Cruz said. That evening, the precinct was quieter. The rain had started again, tapping gently against the windows. Cruz stood near the entrance, Shadow beside him, both watching as the city lights flickered to life beyond the glass. A courier entered carrying a small envelope. Special delivery for Officer Cruz. Cruz took it, opening the seal. Inside was a folded drawing, the one from the twins. Crayon lines, bright and simple, spelling out 3 words, "Thank you, Shadow." He held it for a moment, his throat tightening. Then he knelt beside his partner. "You got mail, buddy." Shadow sniffed the paper, tail wagging once before settling again. Cruz smiled. "You're their hero, you know that?" The dog's eyes glimmered under the soft light, calm and knowing. Cruz leaned back against the wall, the hum of the city alive outside, the quiet hum of justice still pulsing inside. He thought about Janet's words, "You can't stop it." About the nameless M, who was still out there, orchestrating from the shadows. But he also thought about Safari's 5 taps. About Shadow's unshakable instinct. About how miracles don't always come with noise. They come with silence, with attention, with trust. He looked down at the dog beside him and whispered, "You heard what none of us could, didn't you?" Shadow looked up, ears flicking, eyes bright as embers. Cruz exhaled, voice quiet. "There's a line between instinct and miracle, partner. And you walk right on it." Outside, thunder rumbled softly in the distance, but the storm had lost its edge. The night felt different, lighter somehow, even with all the darkness that remained. Cruz straightened, patting Shadow's side. "Come on, hero. Let's go home." As they stepped out into the rain, the city lights shimmered across wet pavement, and for the first time in days, Cruz let himself breathe. Somewhere, in the silence between raindrops, he thought he could still hear it. 5 soft taps, a signal that had changed everything. The sun over Montego Bay shimmered like gold dust scattered across the Caribbean Sea. Waves rolled gently against the shoreline, their rhythm soft and familiar, like the heartbeat of home. At the small private section of the airport, a crowd waited anxiously near the arrival gate. Among them stood 2 people, Mr. and Mrs. Hilton, hands clasped, eyes red from sleepless nights and endless prayers. The weeks since their daughters disappeared had aged them both. Every phone call from the authorities had been a wave of hope followed by the undertow of fear. And then came the call, the one that said their girls were alive. Now they waited, breath held, hearts trembling as the plane door finally opened. 2 small figures stepped into the sunlight, flanked by a pair of child welfare officers. Safari and Engi. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Then the girls ran, tiny legs pumping across the tarmac, tears streaming, voices breaking through the humid air. "Mama! Daddy!" Mrs. Hilton fell to her knees as her daughters crashed into her arms. She wrapped them tight, crying openly, her sobs echoing across the open space. "Me babies, me sweet babies," she whispered over and over, pressing kisses to their hair, their faces, their hands, as if to convince herself they were real. Their father joined, arms enveloping all 3. His voice broke with gratitude and disbelief. "Thank you, God, thank you." Airport staff wiped their eyes. Even the officers who'd escorted the twins turned away, blinking hard. It was the kind of reunion that needed no translation. The pure language of love that had survived what should have been impossible. After what felt like forever, Mrs. Hilton lifted her head, still clutching the girls. "The police dog," she whispered. "The black dog, him save them?" One of the officers smiled softly. "Yes, ma'am. His name's Shadow." She nodded, tears glistening in the sunlight. "Bless him, Lord. Bless that dog forever." Across the ocean in New York City, the mood at the precinct was quiet but proud. The K-9 division had gathered in the main hall, uniforms pressed, badges shining under the lights. Officer Daniel Cruz stood beside his partner, Shadow, who sat calmly at his side. The dog's polished black coat gleamed as if it absorbed the light around him. Captain Harper stepped forward, a small box in his hand. Today, he began, voice carrying the weight of both pride and reverence, we recognize not just service, but instinct, courage born from something deeper than training. He turned toward Shadow. This dog listened when the world was too loud to hear. Cruz lowered slightly as Harper clipped a silver tag onto Shadow's collar. The tag glinted in the light. Commendation of honor, Thine Shadow. Applause filled the room, rising like a wave. Officers clapped, some whistling, others simply watching with quiet awe. Shadow didn't react much, just tilted his head slightly, ears flicking at the sound. But Cruz could feel it. The dog understood in his own way. After the ceremony, Harper placed a hand on Cruz's shoulder. You both did something extraordinary. Don't ever forget that. Cruz smiled faintly. He's the extraordinary one. I just follow his lead. Harper chuckled. That's what makes you a good handler. Nearby, one of the younger officers approached with a manila envelope. This came in for you, she said. Cruz opened it carefully. Inside were 2 folded sheets of paper, the corners creased from careful handling. The first was a letter written in colorful crayon. Dear Officer Cruz and Shadow, thank you for saving us. We are home now. Mommy cooks stew every night and Daddy reads us stories. We miss Shadow. Please tell him we love him. Safari and Engi. The second paper was a drawing. 2 little girls holding hands beside a large black dog under a blue sky. Above it, in uneven handwriting, our hero. Cruz's throat tightened. He crouched beside Shadow, letting the dog sniff the pages. You see that? He murmured. That's you, buddy. Their hero. Shadow's tail wagged once, slow and deliberate. A few weeks later, as part of the official closure of the case, the NYPD arranged a call with the Hiltons. Cruz and Shadow sat in the small conference room as a screen flickered to life. On the other end appeared Safari and Engi, grinning ear to ear, their parents sitting proudly behind them. Mr. Cruz, Safari said, waving so hard her bracelet jingled. Cruz laughed. Hey, Safari. Hey, Engi. Is Shadow there? Engi asked eagerly. Cruz turned the camera toward his partner. He sure is. Shadow tilted his head, ears perked. Hi, Shadow, the girls shouted in unison. The dog's tail thumped softly against the floor. Mr. Hilton leaned forward. Officer Cruz, me family can't ever repay what you and that brave dog did. You saved our hearts. Cruz smiled humbly. You don't owe us anything, sir. Just take care of them. That's all the thanks we need. Mrs. Hilton wiped a tear. We pray for Shadow every night. Tell him he has a home here in Jamaica anytime. Cruz chuckled. He'd love that. But you'd have to hide your dinner. He's got a habit of stealing food when you're not looking. The girls giggled. It's okay, Safari said. He can have mine. The call ended with laughter, but as the screen went dark, the silence that followed was warm, not empty, just full of peace. That evening, as the city descended into dusk, Cruz and Shadow drove toward the pier. The skyline glowed against the fading horizon, steel and fire mirrored in the river's calm surface. They parked near the water. The sounds of seagulls mixed with the soft hum of traffic behind them. Cruz leaned on the hood of his car, hands in his pockets. You know, he said quietly, not every story ends this way. Shadow sat beside him, watching the waves roll in. But this one did, Cruz added, because you listened. He looked down, eyes softening. Sometimes I think there's something more to what you do. Something beyond training. Like you hear what the rest of us can't. Shadow pressed closer, his head resting against Cruz's leg. The officer smiled. Yeah, maybe that's what makes you special. The camera pans across Montego Bay. The air is golden with morning light. At the airport, Safari and Engi walk hand in hand toward the plane that will take them to Kingston for a family visit. They turn at the gate, waving brightly. Cut to New York. Shadow sitting tall beside Cruz at the precinct entrance, his silver commendation tag glinting in the sun. The plane arcs across the sky overhead. Voiceover. Sometimes heroes don't wear capes or carry weapons. Cut to the girls laughing with their parents under palm trees, sunlight filtering through the leaves. Sometimes they walk on four paws. Back to Shadow, his eyes steady, his form proud against the skyline. And listen to the cries no one else can hear. The final image fades to black with the echo of distant waves and the faint sound of 5 gentle taps.
Thank you so much for staying with us till the end of this incredible story. The story of Safari and Engi and the brave canine Shadow reminds us that sometimes the greatest heroes don't speak our language. They simply feel our pain and act when it matters most. It's a powerful reminder that courage, compassion, and instinct can save lives in ways we least expect. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with your friends and loved ones. Your support helps us keep bringing you more real and inspiring stories that celebrate humanity, hope, and the heroes, both human and animal, who make our world a little brighter. We'll be back tomorrow with another powerful story you won't want to miss. And before you go, don't forget to check out the previous video now showing on your screen. Another true story of courage and heart that will stay with you long after it ends. Until next time, this is Tales of an Observer, reminding you, sometimes heroes don't need words. They just listen when no one else can.